That's Prasad, Byron Bay. This is Jerry Katz. You're listening to Nonduality Network Talk Radio on CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, Nova Scotia. James Traverse in the studio. James, what's happening? Are you thinking about what we're going to get into? We were talking earlier that you were at the Shanti Fest. That's nice. I put notes everywhere. James Travers at the Shanti Fest. You are a participant. You were attended, of course. You attended the different events. And tell us something. Well, it's a big thing for Halifax.
Credit for the event has to go to the organizers, though, which were Maryse, Pierre, John, Michelle, and a bunch of other friends. And they put together an extraordinary event. And the day was filled with highlights. Every part of it was a celebration of just what that name suggests, Shanti Fest. And in case folks don't know, Shanti means peace. So it started out with Maryse, and she just did an initiation to the four directions, north, south, east, and west, as well as up and down and then center, and invoked the energies of those directions and set the tone.
That sounds very like indigenous in a way. Can you say a little bit more about Maryse? I know you're very close, and she's a big part of the community.
Yeah, Maryse is just one of those extraordinarily gifted individuals who's part of the yoga community and the artistic community here in Halifax. She's a musician, yoga teacher, and a loving soul. Together with our partner Pierre, they do an extraordinary amount for the yoga community and in general for artistic expression and expression of authentic being in varieties of ways. And being the kind of spirits and souls that they are, they have a lot of like-minded friends like John and Michelle, who together with Maryse and Pierre form a group called Suryachandra. And again, because these folks are the way they are, they have many friends. Dustin LindenSmith, who's just walked into the studio, is one of them. And
did Dustin just walk in? I didn't notice.
I'm easy to miss.
Anyway, just to say a little bit more, that sometimes they expand the troupe to be another group called Namaskar. And that's what they did on Sunday for the Shanti Fest. So from the beginning, with Maryse and the invocations and the quality and presence of who and what she represents, and then the invitation to celebrate peace in all the ways that we did during the course of the day, it culminated at the end of the day with these folks, these incredibly gifted musicians and loving beings, playing live while we all just danced and celebrated. So we had a barefoot ecstatic dance to finish the evening, and naturally a closing circle just wrapped things up at the end. But a quite extraordinary day and a wonderful gift for the folks in Halifax, and you could tell by the way that folks lingered and the hugs and the smiles and the feelings of the peace and the joy that was the outcome of the celebration was really made it very worthwhile.
It sounds like a love fest.
Yeah, love is just another name for peace.
Now, Shanti Fest, I looked it up. I just was Googling it to try to find it locally, and I see that, especially in India, they are. Do you know about the prevalence of Shanti Fests?
Yeah. Well, like the name, Shanti being a Sanskrit name, thousands of years old, it goes back before recorded history. So in one way or another, these sorts of things would have been celebrated for thousands of years. So India is certainly a center for these, and in more recent times, there are more and more organized events with that particular name, Shanti Fest. But for Halifax, this was the first. And naturally, after such an extraordinary day, everybody is saying, well, when can we do it again? People are talking about, let's do it next week. But, it takes such an enormous amount of organization that's just not possible to do that. But it will happen again.
I came late, but can you tell me how many people were there?
I have no idea.
Over 100 or less?
Oh, it was easily over 100.
Easily over 100.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was different segments to the day. We had yoga in the morning. I did a yoga nidra. We had a sonic bath through this gong show.
A sonic bath?
A sonic bath.
Gong show.
Is that with or without clothes on?
It wasn't really gong show. It was people playing gongs.
With or without clothes?
With or without clothes on. That's the
Me
most
and Dustin want to
I
know.
think clothes are optional.
That's where
I think
our
clothes
mind
are
is.
optional, but I had my eyes closed, so I have no idea whether.
Well, clothes are optional, Rick. Get out of here.
Clothes are optional, and your eyes are closed. You are a seriously evolved being.
Definitely deep into sonic baths.
So James Traverse.
We had a couple of
and,
individual
and
performers as well.
I just want to introduce Dustin LindenSmith is now here. So
Yes.
Dustin's here.
Sorry.
Would you have gone to the Shanti Fest? I mean, I was going to go, and then something came up. I'll tell you what came up in a second, but I know you're busy. You got your family obligations.
Well, listen, if they had told me that there was clothing optional sonic baths, I would have been there. Actually, Pierre
didn't we
did invite
invite
me
you?
to come, but I
Yeah.
wasn't able to go that day.
Yeah.
I was going to go, and then I read on where it was, and they said, it's yoga. They said bring a mat, bring a blanket,
Well, I think I know where you're going.
bring a
with
blanket, bring a plate and utensils for food.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a heart palpitate. Bring your couch, bring your freezer.
I thought the
I
barefoot
just-
part would have freaked you out.
I didn't book a moving man. The what?
I thought the barefoot part would have freaked
The
you out.
barefoot part would have freaked me out. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not taking
But
anything off. Anyway,
The truth is, you don't need any of those things.
Right, that's
All you
true,
really
too.
needed to bring is your spirit.
I know.
Because,
I probably would have forgotten that at home.
I would.
Yeah. I'd
No,
like to ask about the barefoot ecstatic dancing,
Yeah.
and I'm very curious to know if that is in the same vein as the whirling dervishes thing, where you're dancing yourself into a sort of a
I don't-
transcendent frenzy
in a certain way,
and, and attaining some sort of
Yeah.
a altered state of
Or
consciousness.
is it trance music or?
no, there is another version of these sorts of things literally called trance dance.
Mhm.
And
That does
like the
not
word-
involve taking MDMA before.
no.
Right. That does
like the
not
word
involve taking MDMA before.
no.
Right.
And like the whirling dervishes and things, but it's all a matter of presence anyway. So
Yeah.
for those people who are present and just simply are able to release into the moment and allow the music to take one, then the experience certainly can be transcendental. And so what does transcendental mean, or what does actual trance means? It just simply means a non-ordinary experience. And then the question is, well, what is our ordinary experience? Our ordinary experience, given that this is non-duality talk radio, is that dualistic mode. People are so self-conscious about how they appear and, making a spectacle of themselves.
Who is?
Yeah, exactly.
But in these events, like the feeling of ecstasy, in a certain way, you really are beside yourself, and there is still a witness consciousness as to what is unfolding. So it's possible to have a sort of a trance experience in that particular way. But again, if one is analyzing it in any way, intellectualizing it, then you're not having an authentic experience. You're having something that you're interpreting. Is in the experience of Shanti, the peace. Well, building throughout the day, different tastes and ways to embrace peace and celebrate it, culminated in this ecstatic dance. So the flowering of all of these nurturing that happened through the food that was served, through the interactions of the people, through the individual performances, and the overall underlying theme of peace being celebrated, then the dance, the music, the sound, it doesn't break the stillness, it doesn't break the silence. It's just an extraordinary manifestation of peace.
Mhm.
And in that way, it is a trance. There's no one there doing it, but there's a lot of things happening.
You give a really beautiful description of it, and you're a big part of it. I mean, you are a big presence there. Not only are you a presence there throughout the day, but you also did lead a session in Nidra yoga
Yes.
as well.
Yeah, the yoga nidra, again, it's all of these things they're all like gems on a string. And so yoga nidra was one of the things that we were able to do, and It was coupled with some yoga that Maryse presented with, that's another beautiful aspect. Maryse led some yoga postures and things with John and Michelle in the background doing chanting and some mantra. And that was just such a beautiful compliment. And so that set things up for people, again, to be able to explore what I led, which was the Yoga Nidra. And Yoga Nidra is, it approximates deep sleep. So the challenge is actually to remain alert and awake and at the same time relax. So what relaxes is the physical body to a large extent, but even more in terms of what lets go is the relaxation of the mind. So when the mind is silent, which it is willing to do after a little bit of fatigue from some of the yoga asanas, and again the invitation from the invocations of the mantras chanted by Michelle and John, and then me as a facilitator, I would use certain language and cadence and pacing for inviting people to let go and relax, and that flowers as peace.
Let's try to replicate some of the atmosphere. I have some Om chanting here that we can...
Yes, we did this a number of times during the day.
That we can try.
That was pretty good. We were really
are we relaxed?
We were rocking out here, dancing in the studio to that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing some ecstatic dancing.
Put your clothes back on.
Yeah.
I still have my eyes closed.
Oh.
You can keep them closed, you know. You don't.
I'm surprised, James, by how much hair there is on your chest. I had no idea.
I took my shoes and socks off. We're freaking out.
Oh, that's why it smells like that in here.
Sorry.
No, it's more like...
Well,
yeah. Were you going to comment on Om?
Not me, James.
James.
Well, we can.
James is a good Omer. Well,
yes.
You know what? The three of us could be chanting. What are we sitting here?
It's very,
clear my throat.
it really
Okay.
came in vogue in the
What's
Western
this-
world, like in the 60s, right? Was it a TM thing where it became really trendy?
Well, there's a lot of things that have become trendy, but again, you know, Sanskrit, and particularly this sound, Om, this is the sound of the universe. And so it's ageless. And yes, there's been times when it's been popularized in a variety of ways by different traditions over the centuries, and one of those would have been the 60s. But this particular sound, it is the sound of the universe. It is a vibration. And the nature of the universe can be described as a breathing. And actually what Om can be, one of the ways that Om can be approached is as a breathing process. And the vocalization of it is a full exhalation and a silent Om on a full inhalation. And it works all of the lobes of the lungs, the lower, the middle, and the upper lobes of the lungs. And not only is it a vibration and a very unique sound, the way that it's sounded, it covers the entire range of human vocalization. So to be able to breathe properly, to make this sound, then you have to also vocalize in the entire range of the human possibility. And so here's a way to describe this. If you go to the zoo and you visit the primates, there's a typical sound that you'll hear from that enclosure, and it's ah, 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 right? The ah sound. So it's very primal, and just feel where that sound comes from. That's from deep down in the belly, very low in terms of the physicality of where it comes from. So that's very primal. Ah. And then the middle, the oh, is more in the middle of the mouth in terms of the way that it sounded. And that's the kind of sound of wonder. So when you really are wondering about something, or in that space of wonder, or even a little bit surprised, you might go, oh.
So it's like, so the first sound is like a,
Ah.
so, oh.
But let's just put the last one on
Okay.
first. And then you've had an experience like Shanti Fest, and you want to savor it. And the kind of sound that you might make would be a kind of humming, And so it's o, And sometimes it's spelled A-U-M. And, you know, it's a Sanskrit symbol. So as best we can in English, we break it into these kind of pieces that I'm currently describing. And so to sound it, one has to first empty the lungs. You get rid of all the stale air out of the body.
Should we do it?
Yes.
Empty your lungs.
First, let me give you a description first.
All right, go
So
ahead.
first you would empty your lungs, evacuate all the stale air from your body, then allow a full inhalation.
Just from the lungs, though?
You would empty all of the air out
Can
of
you
the body.
clarify that? I'm not taking my shoes off.
Okay, so you come to full empty. And then a silent Om is sounded as the inhalation is received. So that's the gift of life. You take it deep into the belly, to the lower lobes of the lungs, then to the middle lobes of the lungs, and to the top lobes of the lungs, filling the chest on the front, the back, the sides, bottom, middle, and top, right? And then the exhalation is a slow, controlled release, like squeezing out a tube of toothpaste. It starts from that very primal ah kind of sound, and then a natural transition into the oh, and then a savoring at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So with me, if you're ready, a full exhalation. A deep smiling inhalation. And when you're ready, sound.
He has better breath control than us.
Yeah,
I don't know about that, you being a saxophone player.
Well, I was thinking when you were talking about the way those three sounds work, it was reminiscent of the sounds I made when we were playing that chant and James took off his shirt and I was like, uh-oh.
And you were thinking that, and I was thinking, now I got to bring toothpaste. First I got to bring a blanket, now I got to... Anyway, see, we all got things going on in our head, right, that make no sense.
Yeah.
And yet something like Shanti Fest or any element of it brings us beyond all that crap.
That's the whole idea, is to allow especially a mental peace. And at the same time, like the extraordinarily beautiful quality of Shanti Fest is to do it collectively. And the sense of community and the kinship that comes out of that kind of celebration, where it's not just me experiencing authentic being. I'm there with, a few hundred people over the course of the day, and the hugs, the smiles, you can taste the originality of it. These are not just pretend. The people really do experience something that is of that quality of being, which can be described as being authentic.
And we, while we're here, we're on the radio, and we're fooling around. But when we have our meetups, our monthly or more than monthly meetups, they're pretty kind of like a Shanti Fest atmosphere.
Yeah.
I mean, we're all quite...
well, they're a satsang.
We're all quite still. We're not doing like, a show.
Particularly during the meditation.
We're not entertaining.
Yeah. Well,
really. I mean, there is a socialization, and there is fun.
And we're three guys, so we like to fool around and make these jokes. But
we especially like to fool around with each other.
Sorry,
I wasn't supposed to say that on the air.
But
we'll take another break here and fool around with each other.
Particularly during those meditations, though, I do notice that. And I've gone to all kinds of different sorts of meditation classes and various things like that, and for some reason I find them different with the satsang.
Yeah. Well, we're going to meet again. We're going to meet again this Sunday. Now, we mentioned the gong bath, and I have some gong bath happening here. If you guys want to.
A sonic bath.
We got to take our clothes off again.
Regardless of what these guys are saying, I'm not taking my clothes off.
This is, see, for me it's a lot easier. And by the way, did you bring a mat and a blanket and some toothpaste?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm not going to play it unless I can see you got a mat there.
Unless you can watch me take my sonic bath.
All right, you ready for a little gong bath? And
let's hear it.
And this is actually from Sound Beings. Those are the people that appeared at
they had a beautiful presentation.
And I think Sound Beings.
It was really interesting. For me, I sat up for the first part of it, and then and it was quite special because you can feel the vibrations viscerally. Your ribs start to vibrate with these things. But after a while, many of the people were lying on the floor, and so I joined them. I'll lie, and in that supine position, you could literally feel the quality even more penetrating because the floor itself takes on this.
And it's supposed to be more than sound. It's a physical vibration.
There's a definite vibration that's felt. So it really is visceral.
So let's see how this goes here. Turn up your radio. That's a little bit of gong bath. I don't know how that came out.
I keep calling it gong bath.
That's what I have called gong bath.
There are gongs that they're playing.
Yes.
Gongs. They're just like making.
These are large gongs. They're about 3 feet in diameter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, And they said that they only had 4. These particular ones were tuned to the planets, the Earth and the Sun. And so I found the experience I found quite celestial. It was really, interstellar. It is ethereal, so, it's kind of easy to get into a mental interpretation of some kind of interstellar space travel.
Especially, if you're going to be, you're lying on the floor listening to this for an hour.
Yes.
It must literally just sort of wash away your thoughts. Like after a while,
all there is this sound.
Yeah, the sound would just sort of permeate your whole awareness after a while.
Exactly.
I just want to say that it's 2 o'clock, and this is CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This is Non-Duality Network Talk Radio, and we're here with James Traverse and Dustin LindenSmith. And
I should mention, Jerry, just before we move on to any other topic, that these folks, Suryachandra, they're doing another performance coming up on December 7th at the Yogashala.
Is there a website like Suryachandra dot something?
I guess. I honestly don't know.
On that sheet of paper I have some websites, and you can read it on the first page. You can't read. Can you read my typing? No. I know you can't read my writing, but it's typing.
Sorry, yeah, Suryachandra.net, SURYA, Chandra.net. Yeah.
Yeah, so people can go there. And we have a clip from Suryachandra, too. We'll play that in a little bit later.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Dustin, what's been new with you you were here last week.
I was here last week. There's not much to report.
Let's just transition from Shanti Fest to Crazy Fest here, because your life's busy, right?
Yeah, because I am crazy.
No, your life's just busy. You have a busy life.
My life is busy. It's true. I don't know if it's like more busy than anyone else's, but it does.
It's more busy than anyone else's.
Maybe it is. I have the busiest life of anybody.
Well,
in the
Dustin,
world.
I've known you now for a number of years,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen quite a change in you, I think, in the past 3 to 5 years. And a lot of it has to do with, what way you're interacting with your children.
Yeah, that's a good observation. I do think it's a bit of a cliche to say that raising children is the most challenging spiritual practice that there is, but I have found it to be. I've been, I've been interested in yoga and spirituality and meditation topics since about the age of 17.
Yeah.
But I never really thought that I had an opportunity to put any of it into practice in a serious way until after I had kids.
Yes.
Which is ironic because you have much less time to do any serious spiritual practice once you have kids. Yeah. But I think what I mean by that is that having children, if you're not going into it as a pretty enlightened individual, having children can be extremely triggering for all of the various neuroses and psychological shortcomings that you have as an individual. And they just draw that out of you, because if you're not kind of centered and sort of solid in your own approach, then the stress that's associated with raising children, along with the sleep deprivation, is profound. Kind of screws you up in a way. So I don't know. I remember when we first started doing these satsangs, we would try to think of specific examples from our individual lives about how we're sort of trying to put this kind of stuff into practice, or where we're having trouble putting it into practice. And I would always come up with examples about, so what the hell am I supposed to do with these young toddlers of mine who are driving me crazy because they're climbing up the walls, literally. And it's funny, I came across something that my mother sent me, and it's from a parenting expert named Susan Stiffelman. Now, it's hard for me to gauge. Now, granted, I'm not sure exactly who's listening to this show right now. I have a feeling it's not a bunch of university students, but it's hard to say, because they might not be able to identify with what kind of value there is in listening to a parenting coach. I don't know. It's hard to say. But I've been on this sort of quest for the last few years. I've been reading a lot of books about parenting, and I've been listening to a lot of interviews with parenting experts and this kind of thing, trying to sift through the people that are just kind of airy-fairy experts, so to speak, and trying to find the ones that are a little bit deeper, who are trying to kind of, not just giving you tactics for how to get your kids to behave properly, but who are rather giving you ways to develop sort of an empathetic, more profound connection with your kids, which I think doesn't come as naturally for fathers as it does for mothers. Mothers have that early childhood bond that they start with their babies. That bonding is really it's biological. There's neurochemical things that are happening between a mother and her child. The same things can happen with a father and their child, but it didn't happen with me in the beginning, because I was a stay-at-home dad that was profoundly, in my opinion, ill-equipped for the rigors of raising very young kids. So some of the stuff that I've been reading about lately has been beneficial sort of in retrospect, but this thing that I just came across recently I thought was kind of interesting, and it was featured on Eckhart Tolle's website, actually. And maybe I'll just read to you what she said. She says, she's referencing Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, and he says, while the child is having a painbody attack, there isn't much you can do except to stay present so that you're not drawn into an emotional reaction. The child's painbody would only feed on it. Painbodies can be extremely dramatic. Don't buy into the drama. Don't take it too seriously. If the painbody was triggered by a thwarted wanting, don't give in now to its demands. Otherwise, the child will learn, the more unhappy I become, the more likely I am to get what I want. End quote. She continues, she says, this idea is what is powerful. When we argue or negotiate with a child while he or she is caught up in an emotional hurricane, we only make the winds blow more fiercely. Instead, parents can stay quiet and still, listening with a loving and open heart, without having an agenda for making things different than they are. And that's the end of her excerpt. And what just hits me so strongly about that is that so much of the conflict that I hear of other parents having with their kids, if you reduce it to its most fundamental part, it has to do with the kids not behaving according to the parents' expectations. And sometimes their expectations are completely reasonable. They might be like, it's time for you to go to bed, it's time to go to school, or we've got to eat our dinner, or whatever. But there's a very fine line that you can walk as a parent where you're kind of adopting a coercive stance with your kids to try and force them to behave the way you want them to. And I found that it was reflective of a whole way that I was looking at my whole life, where I would see my 3-year-old as thwarting my desires or thwarting my vision of the way this should go, or why is he screaming at me because he wants a certain thing, this is ridiculous, and there's something that kind of released in me when I stopped wanting the kids to behave in a certain way, and when I stopped trying to fight against the way things actually were. And also when I tried to adopt a stance with the kids that was based more in kindness instead of trying to get them to behave in a certain way. Because the behavior, it passes so quickly. Even the worst temper tantrum is probably over in 5 minutes. But if my kid has a temper tantrum and I get really mad about it myself, I totally stretch out the negative effects of that tantrum for hours after the effect. Yes. And if I can instead come to the child with just pure openness, just acceptance that and compassion for the pain that they're feeling, because if the kid is 4 years old and screaming their head off, they're not trying to do that to manipulate you. That's really what they're feeling at the time. It's a valid emotion that they're feeling. I mean, if you were in that situation, hopefully you wouldn't start screaming and freaking out, because you can handle not getting the ice cream right now, or some of us can. But, or at least we'll act out in a different way that doesn't involve screaming our heads off. But But for the child, it's a real thing that they're really experiencing.
Yeah.
And when I posted this on Facebook this morning, and I was talking about my own experience with it, and I said that I have noticed in the recent past, like in the last 5 or 6 months or something, that anytime that I can come to him with just a more open attitude about it, not going in with a feeling like, oh my God, why are you doing this? I want you to stop this. But rather, oh, I feel your pain. What's wrong? How can I help? Even if on the surface it seems like I'm the cause for his pain because I'm preventing him from doing something he wants to do. There's a nice little backdoor way that you can deal with this, where you get down, you literally get down on your knees in front of the child, and you open up your arms and you hug them, and you're like, I'm so sorry for what you're feeling. I'm sorry you feel like this. You're just kind of like connecting with them on an emotional level without trying to explain why they can't have that thing or tell them why it's not right to do that or anything like that, but just to connect with them emotionally on their level at the moment based on what's happening at the time without trying to do anything or change anything. I'm very pleasantly surprised by how often the storm just blows over. And if there's any sort of root cause to our obsessive drive to distract ourselves with Facebook or our phones or the internet or any other thing, or food or drugs or anything, I think it comes out of this feeling that so many of us have that when we feel a negative emotion, we have to run away from it. Mm-hmm. We have to distract ourselves from it. We're not giving ourselves license to just feel what's happening. Let ourselves experience the negative emotion for what it is, and then let it pass. And I can't think of any instance, well, I mean, maybe I'm wrong saying this, but I can't think of many instances where you're not feeling a negative emotion for a reason. Mm-hmm. You can take that, you can look at that reason, and you can pay attention to that and see if there's something in your life that you need to deal with as a result of this emotions coming up. But you don't need to reflexively run away from the emotion or try to avoid it or anything like that. And we all have our ways of doing that. My most common way for my whole life since I was probably 10 years old has been to eat. Like a couple of years ago, I was 330 pounds. Like, I ate every emotion I had, whether it was good or bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if I can let myself feel those emotions and just kind of sit with them, I honestly can't think of a time when they haven't just passed within minutes.
Yes.
Meanwhile, if those emotions, like 5 years ago, if those emotions came to me, and I would, go to a drive-through or whatever, I just am continually pushing off my experiencing of these emotions over time, and it just creates this sort of toxic garden bed of emotions that just never, I don't know how to describe it in any other way. So I kind of feel like this parenting thing that I was just talking about is a way for us to teach our kids to validate the emotions as they come up. It's okay to feel bad emotions. We can't teach our kids to run away from our emotions at such a young age, we got to let them feel them and show them how to experience an emotion that's bad, get through to the other side, and understand that once you're done, and it's okay. Yes. You can move on from that, and a few minutes later, you feel okay.
Yeah. And like you said in the beginning, it's not a superficial trick or a technique. This is real, real, I don't know if you want to use the word mindfulness, inquiry.
Yes.
It's really being in touch,
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And Dustin is doing it through parenting, but as he was saying, wondering about who's listening to this. Life is the teacher. And in Dustin's case, he's had these great teachers, these children, and he's living testament to the fact that, by welcoming it as it is. Now, I think that your experiences prior to the children and things, clearly that helps because you had some resources that you could go to, but they really flowered and became actualized through the process of parenting.
True, but I have to admit that any of those tools that I may have entered the parenting world with, I didn't really trust them, right? I didn't believe.
Well, they haven't been tested yet.
No, I know, but I mean, I just, and I realize now in retrospect too that, you know, well, and I wore it on my body with the excess weight I was carrying as a result of how I was dealing maladaptively with my stress and emotions, right? Like, so clearly I didn't trust myself.
Yes.
To actually be able to experience these emotions without exploding.
Yeah.
And that's a really fundamental sort of illness that we all have.
Yeah, I think so too. But just to mirror some of what you're saying in terms of my own life experience, like you have a challenging schedule with family life and all of those demands and things with children and being a father and being a husband. You know, I've had the luxury and I've organized my life to explore these things, yoga-wise and meditation and mindfulness and those kind of activities at great depth, and I've been blessed to have the connections with the people that I've so-called studied with. And it's just another way that, that folks can explore these things. I think that the average person can maybe relate a little bit more to your life because, you know, many people are married and have children and have to deal with, you know, the life of being involved with a family and working for a living and things like that. I've done the starving artist thing and created time and space to go and explore in that particular direction, and, you know, that was my route.
Yeah, I always thought that I was going to do that. I mean, when I started reading about, I think I read Paramahansa Yogananda's book, when I was 17. And when I read about his life of study and his monastic lifestyle in the mountains and that kind of stuff, I just thought that just sounded like heaven to me.
Yeah, it did to me too.
I mean, I just thought, what else could you want than to just go off into the mountains, be alone?
When I was a kid, I read Thomas Merton, and I felt like, you know, I wanted to be like that, like a monk, and just so I mean, we're all similar in that way.
I had that exact same motivation to go to a monastery and do that particular thing, but at some point I realized that was an escape, and that, like, I really appreciate people like Dustin who've done the family thing, done the real challenging thing of being a parent, and doing it successfully, you know, with all its challenges.
I mean, it can be an escape, but it's not easy to live in a monastic situation.
I'm not saying it's necessarily easy, but
yet it could be an escape.
For me, the truth was it would have been an escape,
Right.
because I could do that. I could do the happily ever after living in the monastery, because I guess I have a certain personality that fits with. But I would not have grown in a certain way being there. I think I could have done the rituals and done, you know, had the external appearance of looking like a very well-trained monk. So what? So you can sit quietly for a time. That doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Well, yeah, who hasn't heard... I think there's somebody on the Non-Duality Highlights Facebook group whose name is like a Rinpoche. So this is like a Tibetan sort of tulku of some kind, who's a complete screw-up, right?
I had to... he's no longer on the...
Did you kick him off?
Well, let's not say I kicked him out.
Well, I mean, but you shut him down. Like, you called him out for what he was, which was a poser.
I threw him out.
So, you know, you got a guy like that who probably has lived his entire life in a monastery, but hasn't learned the art of the interpersonal relationship.
Well, he was talking to the group. He wasn't talking to individuals. You know, he was talking to the group. Everybody was wrong. Everybody.
But I mean, here's a supposedly enlightened
group, not
Tibetan Lama who's essentially internet trolling. You know, like so.
Yeah, that's what could happen if you isolate yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I do think like one of the greatest teachers I know of is Pema Chodron, who only started teaching after her sort of worldly life, right?
Yeah.
She was married, had kids, had a job, all that kind of stuff. I do think there's a lot of value in getting your act together in life. And I mean, and that's the standard path that most of these folks do. I mean, the standard tradition in the yoga tradition is you know, you're a householder, and you don't take your sannyasin vows until you're at least 50, and you have a mutual agreement with your family. You leave your family on good terms, like, you leave with their love and support. You're not divorcing your wife so that you can go be a monk.
Yeah.
You're going with their blessing.
That's
because
true.
you've lived your life really well with them. And now you can move on to the next stage of your life. It's almost unnatural to go into this when you're in your 20s.
Exactly. That in the recognized yogic tradition, there are very distinct stages, and the sannyasi would be the mature stage, the evolved stage that happens later in life. As a species, I think we're all evolving, and that's not necessarily the case these days. Many of these sages, they recommend staying with the family, and because life really is the teacher. It's hard to get a better teacher than life itself.
And the most challenging thing we can do is to be, spiritually grounded in the context of a very hectic life, I think.
Yes. But that makes that's what makes it real. And again, the taste of life, and whether it's like that celebration I was just talking about, the Shanti Fest, or raising your children and finding that precious moment where you're down there on your knees and you're hugging the child and you're telling the child it's okay to not feel to feel okay.
Yeah, it's okay not to feel bad.
Yeah. Because that's real, and it's what's actually happening. And now there's that's present moment consciousness as well. All those books come together in this one experience.
Yeah.
And that taste, the actual experience, is better than all the books you can buy.
It's very true. Very true.
Now we're brought to that point. Yeah, you brought us right there. That's why that's why you're here.
Yeah.
None of us want to say anything.
Well, I think it's a good time to maybe play one of those clips, either Suryachandra.
I got some
or the
Suryachandra. You want to hear some Suryachandra? Here.
Yes.
Listen up.
Well,
So
here we are.
That was Suryachandra. We have a couple of minutes left here. So, Dustin, you play the tenor sax. Didn't they, can you play with those guys, do you think?
I suppose I could. I'd have an easier time doing that now than I would have when I had shortly exited my music school training.
Dustin has played at some of our satsangs.
I have,
People
yes.
have really appreciated that.
Yeah.
We had some wonderful comments about how much they enjoyed your playing.
Well, it's mostly, I've said this several times before, the most rewarding thing about playing at one of these satsangs is that you have the undivided attention of your audience. And when you're a jazz musician, that's not usually the case.
Yeah.
You know, like most of the professional gigs you have as a jazz musician are in restaurants or nightclubs where you're essentially providing background music. Once upon a time, people would go just to hear the musicians. You know, but that ended years ago.
I want to thank both you guys for being here. James Travers, thank you very much. Dustin LindenSmith, thank you. Thank you both. You guys will be back.
Sure.
Just stay right here.
Sure.
Till next week. Any announcements we have? We want to remind local people, that we have one of our non-duality satsang meetings on December 1st.
This is coming
Sunday.
right?
Everyone's invited. You can go to nonduality.ca and check that out. James, you're on Facebook, right? I'm going to post the links on the for everybody.
Yeah.
Also want to thank Mandy LaBelle, creator of the show. Her website is yogaheart.ca. And what else? You guys have anything else to?
Mandy has a good regular yoga class that she teaches too.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of things happening in the yoga community as we get closer to Christmas. Yoga practices, dances, and gatherings. Maybe there's a few too many to list just now, but when you're posting these things, I'll provide some of that information. I know that Jody Myers is doing a yoga and a dance thing coming up. She was another one of the presenters at Shanti Fest.
Music we're playing is I Am Free by Prasad, a Canadian group. I think we're going to have Prasad sing us out, play us out. See you again, guys. Thank you again.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Dustin.
See you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.